The red warning lights flashed across every planet in the galaxy as the emergency broadcast began. Ambassador Krull stood before the massive holographic display in the council chamber, his 6 eyes wide with terror that had not been seen for 3,000,000 years. His voice shook as he spoke the words that would change everything. The Devourers had returned. Every species in the galaxy knew the stories. Ancient machines that swept through space in waves, consuming entire worlds and leaving nothing but empty void behind. The last time they came, 1,000 civilizations had been reduced to dust and memory. The few survivors who lived through that horror still woke screaming from nightmares of endless metal teeth and the sound of worlds being devoured. "The mathematical projections are clear," Krull announced, his voice carrying across subspace to every inhabited world. "The Devourers will reach the Outer Rim territories in 18 standard months. We estimate complete galactic consumption within 50 years. On the planet Earth, humanity's newest representative to the Galactic Council, Director Lisa Park watched the broadcast with her team of advisors. Around the galaxy, other species began their preparations for the end. The proud Montari Empire started building massive vaults to preserve their culture. The warrior clans of the Stellar Dominion began forging weapons they knew would be useless. Even the ancient Thek, who had survived the last Devourer wave, began their death songs, but in the human conference room, something unexpected happened. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth specialist in alien life forms, paused the holographic display and started laughing. "Wait," he said, wiping tears from his eyes. "These are the things everyone's been afraid of for 3,000,000 years?" He zoomed in on the tactical readings showing the Devourer fleet. The ships were enormous, each one the size of a small moon. They moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls covered with what looked like devastating weapons. But to human eyes, they looked like something else entirely. "Lisa," Webb said, pointing at the screen. "Look at their movement patterns. Look at their feeding behavior. Look at how they organize themselves." Park studied the data with growing understanding. The Devourers moved in swarms, following chemical trails left by scout units. They consumed everything in their path, then moved on to the next resource-rich area. When they found a particularly good feeding ground, they would signal others to join them. Their entire life cycle revolved around consuming, reproducing, and moving on. "They're basically space locusts," Park said finally. "Really big, really dumb space locusts?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. While the rest of the galaxy prepared for the apocalypse, the humans were seeing something completely different. They weren't looking at an unstoppable force of cosmic destruction. They were looking at a pest problem. "Has anyone tried pest control?" asked Dr. Amy Rodriguez, head of Earth's Agricultural Defense Department. She had been quiet during the briefing, but now she leaned forward with interest. "I mean, actual pest control. Not warfare, not negotiation, not hiding, just basic pest management." The other humans in the room exchanged glances. It was such a simple question, but apparently no one in the galaxy had ever asked it before. Every species had approached the Devourers as either a natural disaster to be endured or an enemy to be fought. None had considered them as what they actually were, an invasive species that needed to be managed. "Pull up the historical data," Park ordered. "Everything we have on previous Devourer invasions." The holographic display shifted, showing patterns that stretched back millions of years. Every invasion followed the same basic pattern. The Devourers would emerge from deep space, consume everything in their path for a few decades, then return to dormancy. The timing was predictable, the behavior was consistent, and the results were always the same. "It's exactly like a cicada emergence," Rodriguez said, her excitement growing. "Or a locust swarm, same behavior, same life cycle, same patterns. We've been dealing with these exact problems for thousands of years." General Robert Hayes, Earth's military representative, looked skeptical. "These things have destroyed entire star systems. They've wiped out civilizations that were millions of years old. You're saying we can just spray them with bug killer?" "Not bug killer," Rodriguez corrected. pest management. There's a difference. We don't necessarily have to kill them all. We just need to disrupt their behavior patterns and make them go somewhere else. She pulled up her own data, showing how humanity had dealt with similar threats throughout history. Agricultural societies had always faced swarms of destructive insects. Sometimes they fought them, sometimes they diverted them, and sometimes they simply made their crops less appealing to the pests. The key was understanding the behavior and working with it instead of against it. Every invasion follows the same pattern, Rodriguez continued. They scout ahead, mark the best feeding areas, then bring in the main swarm. It's exactly what migratory locusts do. The only difference is the scale. Park nodded slowly. So what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we treat them like any other pest, Rodriguez said. We disrupt their navigation, we interfere with their reproduction, and we make the areas they want to consume less attractive to them. The concept was so simple, so fundamentally human, that it took several minutes for the full implications to sink in. While the rest of the galaxy prepared for war or extinction, Earth was preparing for what amounted to a really big extermination job. The Galactic Council isn't going to understand this, Hayes warned. They've been dealing with this threat for millions of years. They're not going to accept that the solution is pest control. Then we'll have to show them, Park decided. Rodriguez, I want a full plan on my desk within the week. Webb, start analyzing their biology for weaknesses. Hayes, figure out what kind of ships we'll need for this operation. As the meeting broke up, Park remained behind, staring at the holographic display. The Devourers continued their relentless approach, unaware that for the first time in galactic history, someone was looking at them not with fear, but with the cool, calculating gaze of an exterminator sizing up a job. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the best way to deal with an ancient cosmic horror was to treat it like the pest it had always been. While the rest of the galaxy prepared for the end of civilization, Earth's response was unlike anything in galactic history. The Global Defense Initiative didn't mobilize massive fleets or build evacuation ships. Instead, they called a meeting. With the Department of Agriculture, Dr. Amy Rodriguez stood before the assembled world leaders, her presentation displaying charts that would have seemed absurd to any other species. Where the Galactic Council saw unstoppable cosmic destroyers, she saw familiar patterns that human farmers had dealt with for millennia. The behavioral characteristics are textbook, Rodriguez explained, pointing to the movement patterns of the approaching devourer swarm. Synchronized emergence, resource depletion strategies, chemical communication, and predictable migration. Roots. We've been managing these exact behaviors since the dawn of agriculture. She pulled up a comparison chart that made several world leaders lean forward in their seats. On one side was the devourer invasion pattern from 3 million years ago. On the other was the movement of desert locusts across North Africa in the 21st century. The patterns were nearly identical. Every aspect of their behavior matches known. Pest species, Rodriguez continued. They emerge from dormancy when environmental conditions are right. They follow chemical trails left by scout units. They consume everything in their path, reproduce rapidly, then return to dormancy when resources become scarce. President Michelle Torres of the United Earth Government raised her hand. Doctor, you're comparing galaxy-spanning machines to insects. The scale difference is enormous. Scale doesn't change behavior, Rodriguez replied. A locust swarm that covers a continent follows the same basic patterns as a handful of aphids in a garden. The devourers are bigger, but they're still following the same biological imperatives. She clicked to the next slide, showing agricultural records from across Earth's history. Locust swarms in ancient Egypt, cicada emergences in North America, even the migration patterns of army ants in South America. All displayed the same fundamental behaviors as the approaching devourer fleet. The key insight is that we don't need to destroy them, Rodriguez explained. We need to manage them. Farmers don't usually try to kill every single pest. They disrupt breeding cycles, interfere with navigation, and make their crops less appealing to the pests. General Hayes looked skeptical. These things have antimatter weapons and can eat planets. You're talking about treating them like garden pests, because that's exactly what they are, Rodriguez shot back. Garden pests that happen to be the size of space stations. But the principles remain the same. She pulled up her detailed analysis of Devour biology based on the limited data available from previous encounters. The creatures were part machine, part biological organism, with complex chemical communication systems and predictable reproductive cycles. To the galactic powers, they were incomprehensible alien horrors. To Rodriguez, they were just another species with exploitable weaknesses. Phase 1 involves disrupting their navigation systems, she explained. They follow pheromone trails, left by scout units. We can synthesize compounds that interfere with those signals, causing the swarm to lose cohesion and disperse. The presentation continued with Phase 2, biological warfare. Not the planet-destroying weapons that other species imagined, but targeted organisms designed to disrupt devourer reproduction. Engineered viruses that would make them sterile, bacteria that would interfere with their digestive systems, and chemical compounds that would make them sluggish and confused. Phase 3 is habitat modification, Rodriguez concluded. We make the areas they want to consume unappealing. Seed planets with compounds that taste terrible to them, introduce beneficial microorganisms that restore damaged ecosystems, and create environmental conditions that discourage their presence. The room was silent as the implications sank in. Rodriguez wasn't proposing a war against the Devourers. She was proposing pest control on a galactic scale. The resources required would be substantial, noted Finance Minister David Chun. We're talking about building an entirely new class of ships, developing new technologies, and coordinating efforts across multiple star systems. Less substantial than rebuilding civilization from scratch, Rodriguez pointed out. And we already have most of the technology. Crop dusters, fumigation equipment, biological research facilities. We just need to scale them up for space operations. Within days, Earth's shipyards began producing vessels that looked nothing like traditional warships. Instead of massive guns and energy shields, they were equipped with chemical dispensers, biological cultivation chambers, and environmental modification systems. To alien observers, they looked like the strangest military fleet in galactic history. The ship designs were purely functional. The pesticide, a massive vessel designed to disperse chemical compounds across entire star systems. The beneficial, equipped with biological warfare laboratories and deployment systems. The habitat, designed to modify planetary environments and make them unsuitable for devour habitation. Dr. Marcus Webb, leading the biological research team, made breakthrough after breakthrough. The Devourer's chemical communication system was remarkably simple once you understood it. Their reproductive cycle had clear vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Their feeding behavior followed predictable patterns that could be disrupted. They're actually quite primitive, Webb reported to the project team. Sophisticated in terms of individual capabilities, but their collective behavior is surprisingly basic. They're like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Disrupt the signals that keep them together, and they fall apart. The most remarkable discovery came from Dr. Lisa Park herself. While studying the historical records of Devourer invasions, she noticed something that had escaped the attention of galactic historians for millions of years. They're not trying to destroy civilization, she announced during a project briefing. They're trying to clean up after it. The data was clear once you looked at it from the right perspective. The Devourers always appeared after periods of galactic expansion and development. They consumed dead worlds, failed colonies, and abandoned space stations. They were nature's cleanup crew, removing the debris of fallen civilizations and preparing the galaxy for the next cycle of development. They're actually beneficial, Park continued, her excitement growing. They're like cosmic recyclers. The problem isn't that they're evil or destructive. The problem is that they can't tell the difference between abandoned worlds and inhabited ones. This insight changed everything. The Devourers weren't an enemy to be defeated. They were a natural process that had gotten out of control. The solution wasn't to destroy them, but to guide them back to their proper role in the galactic ecosystem. "We're not going to war," Park announced to the assembled project team. "We're going to pest management. And when we're done, the galaxy is going to be a much cleaner place." The Galactic Council's emergency session was unlike any gathering in recorded history. Representatives from across the galaxy had assembled to coordinate their final preparations for the coming apocalypse. The atmosphere was heavy with despair and resignation as species after species reported their evacuation plans and monument-building projects. Ambassador Kroll called the session to order with the traditional prayer for the dead, already mourning civilizations that had not yet fallen. The Mantari Empire presented their cultural preservation vault, designed to survive the complete consumption of their home system. The Stellar Dominion displayed their final weapon designs, knowing they would be useless but building them anyway out of pride. Then Director Lisa Park rose to address the council, and everything changed. The Earth delegation would like to present an alternative approach to the Devour crisis, Park announced, her calm voice cutting through the atmosphere of doom like a blade through silk. Kroll's 6 eyes focused on her with something approaching disbelief. "Director Park, with respect, this is not the time for theoretical discussions. The Devourers will reach the Outer Rim in less than 18 months. We must focus on practical preparations." "That's exactly what we're doing," Park replied, activating the holographic display. "We're preparing to solve the problem." The word "solve" sent a ripple of confusion through the assembly. In 3 million years of galactic history, no one had ever used that word in connection with the Devourers. They were a force of nature like a stellar collapse or a gamma-ray burst. You didn't solve natural disasters. You survived them. The human delegation has analyzed the Devourer behavior patterns, Park continued, seemingly oblivious to the shocked silence around her. "We've identified several key vulnerabilities that can be exploited to neutralize the threat." Ambassador Thane of the Core Worlds rose from his seat, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. "Director Park, these creatures have consumed entire star systems. They have destroyed civilizations that were ancient when your species was still learning to make fire. What could you possibly know about them that we do not?" "We know how to deal with pests," Park replied simply. The translation systems throughout the chamber struggled with the concept. The word pest didn't have direct equivalents in most galactic languages. The closest terms were enemy or threat or disaster, but none of those captured the casual, almost dismissive tone that Park was using. Dr. Marcus Webb joined the presentation via hologram from Earth, his image flickering as he accessed the Council's communication systems. "The Devourers display classic swarming behavior," he explained, pulling up comparative data. "They follow chemical trails, respond to environmental cues, and maintain group cohesion through simple signaling methods. We've been dealing with these exact patterns for thousands of years," added Dr. Rodriguez, her image appearing alongside Webb's. "The only difference is scale," the council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives demanded explanations, voiced outrage, and accused the humans of everything from ignorance to insanity. How dare they compare the galaxy's greatest threat to common insects? How could they speak so casually about creatures that had destroyed entire civilizations? "You're talking about genocide," Kroll finally managed to say, his voice carrying the weight of moral authority. "The complete extermination of a species." "No," Park corrected firmly. "We're talking about pest control. There's a significant difference." She pulled up Earth's pest management protocols, showing how humanity had dealt with similar threats throughout their history. Not extermination, but management. Not warfare, but environmental control. Not destruction, but redirection. "The goal isn't to destroy the Devourers," Park explained. "It's to modify their behavior so they no longer pose a threat to inhabited worlds. We want to guide them back to their proper role in the galactic ecosystem." The concept was so alien to galactic thinking that several translation systems actually crashed trying to process it. The assembled representatives stared at the humans with expressions ranging from confusion to horror. They were talking about managing the Devourers the same way they might manage a garden or a farm. You cannot be serious, Ambassador Thane stated flatly. These are not some primitive organisms that can be controlled with simple chemicals. They are sophisticated weapons of mass destruction. They're sophisticated organisms following simple behavioral patterns, Webb corrected. And yes, they can absolutely be controlled with the right approach. The humans proceeded to outline their three-phase plan with the kind of casual confidence that made the rest of the galaxy deeply uncomfortable. They spoke of pheromone disruption, biological agents, and habitat modification as if they were discussing routine maintenance rather than the salvation of galactic civilization. Phase 1 involves chemical interference, Park explained. We deploy synthetic compounds that disrupt their navigation systems, causing the swarm to lose cohesion and disperse. Phase 2 introduces biological agents designed to interfere with their reproductive cycles, Rodriguez added. Not lethal, but enough to prevent them from replenishing their numbers. Phase 3 focuses on environmental modification, Webb concluded. We make the areas they want to consume less appealing while simultaneously creating better alternatives for them to focus on. The silence that followed was profound. Every species in the galaxy had approached the Devourers as either gods to be appeased or enemies to be fought. None had ever considered them as what they apparently were, a natural process that had gotten out of balance. Even if your analysis is correct, Krull said slowly, the resources required would be enormous. You're talking about coordinating efforts across multiple star systems, developing entirely new technologies, and implementing a plan that has never been attempted on this scale. We're already building the ships, Park replied. Our shipyards have been working around the clock for the past month. The first wave of pest control vessels will be deployed within 6 weeks. This statement sent another wave of shock through the chamber. While the rest of the galaxy had been debating and preparing for evacuation, the humans had already begun implementation. They weren't asking for permission or approval. They were simply informing the Council of what they were going to do. You're going to attempt this alone? Thane asked, his crystalline form pulsing with what might have been respect or terror. We're going to do this, Park confirmed. Whether anyone else helps or not, the implications were staggering. If the humans succeeded, they would fundamentally change the balance of power in the galaxy. If they failed, they would be remembered as the species that thought they could treat cosmic horrors like garden pests. The Council will need time to consider this proposal, Krull announced, though his tone suggested he already knew the outcome. The galactic powers would continue their preparations for evacuation and monument building. The humans would proceed with their pest control operation. As the session ended, Park gathered her materials with the same calm efficiency she had displayed throughout the presentation. The rest of the galaxy might not understand what humanity was planning, but they would soon see the results. The Devourers were still 18 months away, but the humans were already treating them like a solved problem. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most effective response to an ancient terror was to approach it with the practical mindset of species that had spent millennia dealing with bugs. Captain Rita Santos guided her ship through the void toward the approaching Devourer swarm, her crew working with the calm efficiency of exterminators heading to a routine job. The vessel Raid looked nothing like a traditional warship, with its bulbous chemical storage tanks and wide pattern dispersal systems. To any observer, it resembled a massive crop duster more than a military vessel. Contact in 3 hours, reported Lieutenant Tom Miller from the sensor station. The swarm is maintaining formation following the predicted flight path. Santos nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the Devourer fleet in all its terrifying glory. Thousands of biomechanical entities, each the size of a small city, moving through space with perfect coordination. To the rest of the galaxy, they represented the end of civilization. To Santos and her crew, they looked like really big bugs that needed to be dealt with. All ships, this is Raid Actual, Santos announced over the fleet communication system. Beginning Phase 1 deployment in 60 minutes. Remember, we're not here to fight these things. We're here to confuse them. The human fleet had been carefully positioned around the Devourer swarm, each ship loaded with different chemical compounds designed to interfere with the creature's navigation systems. The plan was elegantly simple: flood the area with synthetic pheromones that would disrupt the chemical trails the Devourers followed, causing the swarm to lose cohesion and disperse. Dr. Marcus Webb, aboard the research vessel Boric Acid, monitored the biological sensors as they approached the swarm. The readings confirmed everything the humans had predicted. The Devourers were following chemical markers left by scout units, maintaining formation through simple signaling methods, and displaying all the characteristics of a well-organized pest infestation. Chemical composition is exactly what we expected, Webb reported. Their navigation pheromones are surprisingly basic, almost primitive compared to some Earth insects. On the bridge of the flagship Pesticide, Director Lisa Park watched the deployment with the satisfaction of someone seeing a well-planned operation come together. The human ships moved through space like a coordinated agricultural operation, each vessel playing its part in the larger strategy. "Deploy Phase 1 compounds," Park ordered. The human fleet began releasing their chemical payload, filling the space around the Devourer swarm with carefully synthesized compounds. The effect was immediate and, to human eyes, almost comical. The perfectly coordinated formation began to break apart as individual Devourers started receiving conflicting navigation signals. "It's working," Miller reported, trying to keep the amazement out of his voice. "The swarm is losing formation. Individual units are breaking off and heading in random directions." Santos watched through the bridge windows as the unstoppable force of cosmic destruction devolved into something that looked remarkably like a swarm of confused bees. Devourers that had been moving in perfect formation moments before were now bumping into each other, flying in circles or heading off in completely wrong directions. "Phase 1 is complete," Park announced to the fleet. "All ships begin Phase 2 deployment." The second phase was more complex, involving the release of biological agents designed to interfere with Devourer reproduction. The human ships moved through the confused swarm like crop dusters working a field, dispersing engineered viruses and bacteria that would make the creatures unable to reproduce effectively. Dr. Amy Rodriguez, commanding the biological warfare vessel Beneficial, monitored the infection spread through the swarm. The agents were specifically designed to be non-lethal but highly effective at disrupting the Devourer's ability to create new units. Within hours, the infection had spread through the entire population. "Reproduction rates are dropping rapidly," Rodriguez reported. "The biological agents are performing exactly as predicted. The swarm is effectively sterile." But the humans weren't finished. Phase 3 was the most ambitious part of the operation: environmental modification on a galactic scale. Human ships began seeding star systems with compounds that would make planetary resources taste terrible to the Devourers while simultaneously introducing beneficial microorganisms that would help restore damaged ecosystems. The habitat, equipped with the most sophisticated environmental modification systems ever built, moved through the affected region like a cosmic gardener. Captain David Foster watched his crew work with the precision of a skilled agricultural team, transforming dead space into areas that would be uninviting to Devourers but beneficial to other forms of life. "Seeding operation is complete," Foster reported. "The affected systems now contain compounds that should make them extremely unappealing to Devourer feeding behavior." Throughout the operation, the few galactic observers monitoring the situation watched in stunned silence. The humans had approached the galaxy's greatest threat with the same casual efficiency they might use to deal with a locust swarm. No desperate battles, no heroic sacrifices, no last stands against impossible odds. Just professional pest control on a cosmic scale. The Devourers, meanwhile, were responding exactly as the humans had predicted. Deprived of their navigation systems, unable to reproduce, and finding their traditional food sources unappetizing, they began to scatter and disperse. The massive swarm that had terrified the galaxy for millions of years was breaking apart into individual units that posed no significant threat. "This is incredible," Webb transmitted from his research vessel. The behavioral changes are happening faster than we anticipated. They're not just dispersing, they're actively avoiding areas with high concentrations of our compounds. Santos smiled as she watched the transformation. The devourers were adapting to their new environment exactly as any pest species would. They were learning to avoid areas that were unpleasant to them and seeking out alternatives that were more suitable to their needs. All ships, this is Raid Actual, Santos announced. Operation successful. The devourer threat has been neutralized. The words carried across subspace to every monitoring station in the galaxy. The unstoppable force that had haunted galactic nightmares for 3 million years had been reduced to a manageable pest problem in less than a week. But the humans weren't done yet. The final phase of the operation involved rounding up the scattered devourers and relocating them to areas where they could live out their natural lives without bothering anyone. It was, as Park had explained to the Galactic Council, not extermination but management. Begin collection operations, Park ordered. Let's get these things to their new home. The human ships moved through space like cosmic animal control officers, using tractor beams and containment fields to gather up the confused and disoriented devourers. The creatures offered no resistance, too confused by the chemical disruption to coordinate any kind of response. Within days, the entire devourer population had been relocated to a carefully prepared area in the Andromeda sector, where they were provided with an environment that met their biological needs without threatening inhabited worlds. The galaxy's greatest terror had become the subject of a nature preserve. As the human fleet prepared to return home, Santos took one last look at the scattered remnants of what had once been the most feared force in the galaxy. The devourers were already beginning to adapt to their new environment, their behavior patterns slowly returning to normal now that they were no longer being artificially stimulated by the chemical compounds that had driven them to destructive swarming. Just like any other pest, she said to herself, smiling at the thought. They just needed to be managed properly. 1 year after the Devourer crisis, the Galactic Council reconvened in the same chamber where they had once prepared for the end of civilization. The atmosphere was completely different now. Instead of the desperate urgency that had marked their previous meetings, there was an almost surreal calm as representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss the most successful threat resolution in galactic history. Ambassador Krull called the session to order, but his voice carried none of the terror that had marked his previous announcements. The six-eyed diplomat looked almost embarrassed as he addressed the assembly. We are gathered today to receive the final report on the Devourer situation, Krull announced, the words still sounding strange even after months of repetition. Director Park of the Earth delegation will present the status update. Lisa Park rose from her seat with the same calm confidence she had displayed throughout the crisis. Behind her, the holographic display showed statistics that would have been impossible to believe just 1 year earlier. The Devourer threat level was listed as managed. The galactic extinction probability was marked as 0. The estimated time to complete species recovery was given as ongoing. The Devourer situation has been successfully resolved, Park reported in the same matter-of-fact tone she might use to discuss quarterly budget reports. The threat has been neutralized, and all surviving specimens have been relocated to the Andromeda Nature Preserve. The silence that followed was profound. Every species in the galaxy had spent the past year trying to process what had happened. The ancient terror that had shaped galactic civilization for millions of years had been reduced to a solved problem in less than a week. Could you elaborate on the current status of the Devourer population? Asked Ambassador Thane, his crystalline form pulsing with something that might have been curiosity or disbelief. Certainly, Park replied, pulling up detailed biological reports. The relocated devourers have adapted well to their new environment. They're currently engaged in their natural behavior patterns, processing cosmic debris and maintaining ecological balance in their designated sector. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared via hologram to provide additional details. The biological agents we deployed have integrated successfully with their reproductive systems. They're no longer capable of the rapid population growth that led to swarming. Behavior: current population levels are stable and sustainable. The report continued with updates that would have seemed like science fiction to previous generations. The Devourers had been successfully integrated into the galactic ecosystem management program. They were being used to clear dead star systems, process space debris, and restore damaged environments. The galaxy's greatest threat had become its most efficient cleanup crew. The environmental restoration projects are proceeding ahead of schedule, added Dr. Rodriguez via hologram. The Devourers are actually quite useful for large-scale ecosystem repair. They're helping us clean up areas that were damaged by previous invasions. Ambassador Kroll struggled to process the information. Are you saying that the Devourers are now working for the galactic government? Not exactly working for us, Park corrected. They're following their natural behavior patterns in a controlled environment. We've simply provided them with an ecological niche where their activities are beneficial rather than destructive. The implications were staggering. The humans had not only solved the Devourer problem, they had turned it into a resource. The creatures that had once threatened to consume the galaxy were now helping to restore it. What about the threat of future invasions? Asked the representative from the Outer Rim territories. Could the Devourers return to their previous behavior? Highly unlikely, Webb replied. The biological modifications we've implemented are permanent and hereditary. Future generations will be unable to reproduce at the levels necessary for swarming behavior. Park pulled up long-term projections that showed the Devourers' new role in galactic ecology. Instead of periodic invasions followed by dormancy, they would now maintain a stable population that provided ongoing environmental services. The galaxy would be cleaner, more stable, and better managed than it had been in millions of years. The Galactic Council will need to establish new protocols for managing the Devourer population, Park continued. We recommend the creation of a permanent ecosystem management authority to oversee their activities. This suggestion led to the most significant change in galactic governance in recorded history. The emergency council structures that had been created to deal with the Devourer threat were dissolved and replaced with new institutions focused on proactive problem-solving rather than reactive crisis management. The Earth delegation has prepared a comprehensive proposal for galactic ecosystem management, Park announced, displaying a document that would reshape interstellar civilization. We believe that many of the problems facing the galaxy could be addressed using similar approaches. The proposal outlined humanity's vision for galactic governance based on practical problem-solving rather than traditional diplomatic approaches. Trade disputes could be resolved using economic pest control methods. Resource conflicts could be managed through environmental modification. Even military tensions could be reduced by treating them as behavioral problems to be managed rather than existential threats to be fought. You're suggesting that we approach all galactic problems as if they were pest control issues? Krull asked, his tone suggesting he wasn't sure whether to be amazed or horrified. We're suggesting that you approach problems as problems to be solved, Park replied, rather than forces of nature to be endured or enemies to be fought. The session ended with the formal establishment of the Galactic Ecosystem Management Authority, headquartered on Earth and staffed primarily by humans who had experience in practical problem-solving. The change represented a fundamental shift in how galactic civilization approached challenges. 6 months later, the first Galactic Pest Management Conference was held on Earth, bringing together representatives from across the galaxy to learn human approaches to large-scale problem-solving. The conference was wildly successful, with several species reporting significant improvements in their domestic challenges after applying human pest control methods to their own problems. The Devourers, meanwhile, had become something of a tourist attraction. The observation platforms around the Andromeda Nature Preserve were constantly booked with visitors who wanted to see the galaxy's former greatest threat. Peacefully processing space debris and maintaining ecological balance, the Earth Museum of Galactic History opened a new exhibit called The Great Devourer Scare, which quickly became the most popular attraction on the planet. Visitors could learn about the ancient threat that had once terrified the galaxy, then watch live feeds of the reformed devourers going about their new jobs as cosmic janitors. The exhibit's most popular feature was the children's section, where young beings from across the galaxy could laugh at the idea that anyone had ever been afraid of the space bugs. The display included interactive demonstrations of pest control methods and educational materials about ecosystem management. Director Park, now serving as the head of the Galactic Ecosystem Management Authority, often visited the museum to watch the children's reactions. It never failed to amaze her how quickly the galaxy had adapted to the new reality. What had once been an existential threat was now just another solved problem. The key, she would tell visitors, was recognizing that every problem has a solution. You just need to look at it from the right perspective. The Galactic Council had commissioned a monument to commemorate the resolution of the Devourer crisis. The inscription read, "To the humans of Earth, who taught us that the greatest threats can become the greatest opportunities, and that every problem is just a pest waiting to be managed." It was, Park reflected, probably the most practical monument in galactic history. Just like the solution it commemorated,